to the Economic Times Cutting Chai Stories brought to you by ETH. I'm your host and anchor Deepti Diwan, and I welcome you to this chit chat video series with CXOs over tea to know about their personal and professional journeys. At the Economic Times Cutting Chai Stories, we converse with our guests on some key turning points in their lives, personal and professional, their views on success, business sense, education and training, skills augmentation, work-life balance, and much more. Well, they say the key to successful leadership is influence, not authority. And indeed, this is well suited for our guest today, Mr. Aditya Mony, co-owner and group CTO of Servify. Aditya joined Servify after working in technology functions across a variety of global organizations. At JP Morgan and Chase, he was the head of infrastructure and production management for consumer and community banking (CCB), with accountability for stability and reliability of all internal and external platforms. He was the India CTO for consumer, business banking, auto finance, and enterprise systems, with engineering accountability for these businesses. In these roles, he was credited with transforming IT operations with an engineering and automation-first culture, establishing new capabilities, and workforce transformation to software engineering and agile. He has an MS in computer science from Villanova University, Pennsylvania, and an advanced certification in artificial intelligence and machine learning from the International Institute of Information Technology. Well, to quote the colleagues of Mr. Aditya Mony, Aditya is the leader who can also produce a leader. He is skilled, focused, at the same time very friendly to the team. So a very warm welcome to you, Mr. Aditya Mony.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here.
So these are just a few of the nicest things that your colleagues had to say about you. And we are very elated to have a leader like yourself joining to speak to us. And we hope that you're equally looking forward to this. So let's kick start. So I'm going to ask you to go back in time. Please tell us about your early life, a little brief background about your growing up years, your parents, your friends, and your schooling.
Sure. Firstly, thank you very much for having me here. It's absolute honor and delight to actually do this for ET. As I look back, I feel really privileged that I even have the opportunity to actually do something like this. And really a lot of it is creditable to a whole variety of experience that I've gotten from people and mentors and supporters, throughout my career. You've all seen probably the movie Two States. You were aware of diverse backgrounds. That's exactly what my story is. My father came from south of India, from Alleppey, from a family where his father was an advocate, but basically a very orthodox family. And my mother, on the other hand, actually grew up in a Punjabi family. Of course, after partition, they moved from the frontier, which is now in Pakistan, to India, and then, actually grew up there. And incidentally, her father was also a judge. So basically both from the background lawyers or family of lawyers, but very different lifestyles, very different food habits, very different, culture. And they met, they decided to get married, and they got together, and, subsequently I was born. Now, why I tell you this is because at that time, I feel it must have been really a big challenge for them to even surpass their own idiosyncrasies or differences, right? In terms of what they had gone through as upbringing and familial pressures, societal pressures, and still be able to go and do something like this. On my father's side, again, he was the only one in the family who actually went on to become an entrepreneur. And he set up his own business and what I'm basically sharing is in the process, I've actually come to learn through growing up with them, come to learn a lot about risk taking and about doing something new, something different, something that you want to do and not necessarily conform only to societal norms and things like that, right? And I think that was one of the biggest things that I can recollect from my early family life.
Wow. Indeed, and I'm sure it must help you in all walks of life. Great learning there to be able to do what you really want to do instead of just conforming to what everyone else expects you to do. So great. I think this is a great story. It's sounding like it's straight from a movie, and I'm sure there's lots more that we can take away from this. So tell us, sir, growing up, were you different from kids your age? Did you ever feel that, you had some different aspirations or any or what was your thought process when you were growing up? What did you want to become?
So I grew up in a small, Secunderabad, Hyderabad, if you're familiar with the area. I was born in Meerut in UP, but basically I grew up in Hyderabad. And the area that I was in was basically where a lot of armed force officers would stay. And a lot of my friends were basically from an army background. I was one of few who actually came from a civilian background, albeit in a business family. And so the one thing there was, everyone else would, of course, have their own, even as kids, right? Everyone has their own lifestyles and everything else. And I almost at times had fear of missing out on the army lifestyle. I had glasses from a young age, so I knew I couldn't really go to that, but I would always vicariously live through them. But basically, yeah, for me, a lot of it was really also to hold my own. And I was, right from early days, a technologist. I quite enjoyed playing with things, breaking things. You'd find me tinkering with cars to machinery in the house to whatever. And it really helped that my father had a business which is a manufacturing unit. So I would actually go out there and tinker and make my own things. So that almost gave me the within my friends the title of a geek, though I don't know if it was substantiated, but nevertheless, it was something that helped me, or rather helped identify me within the group. So I wouldn't say very different per se, but that's the way I would look at it.
Absolutely, sir. And did you have any mentors, any influencers while you were growing up? Anyone that you can remember of?
Yeah, I think the family itself actually had quite a few. I mean, like most children, I guess, you look up to your parents. My father was a big influence in terms of the way I would actually look at things. And my maternal grandfather was actually a perfectionist. And somewhere in the growing up years, I actually caught up a lot from him in terms of wanting to have things be perfect. But realized that I also had to balance it with a sense of practicality, right? So you can't really just go after perfection and really not be able to complete things in time. So I think both of them were a big influence in the early years.
Right. Absolutely. And we did come across those adjectives, those terms being used for you. A lot of people had this to say about you that Aditya sir is very detail oriented. He's a perfectionist. So great learnings there from your childhood. So, sir, let's move on to your college education. You studied at Bangalore University, BE Electronics, and you went to Villanova University. Any instances that you recall during your college days that have shaped you as a person, or any such memories that has had a positive impact on you?
So engineering days in Bangalore, we were quite caught up in a lot of the student strikes and things like that. And of course, you had to pretty much, if you want to graduate, you still want to complete your education, you have to pretty much just take complete control and get things done, because we would hardly get a chance to actually go to the class and get proper, just sit through classes, right? So engineering days were very different in the sense that, yes, it gave me a lot of good connection with a lot of people, but reality was that was the first time I was outside of the house on my own in a different city, and a lot of pressure. My father's side of the family comes from the mindset that education is everything, and there was a lot of pressure around wanting to actually do not just stop at a bachelor's, but do a master's, do a PhD, etc. So I knew back of my mind that if I don't really take care of this foundational aspect, then I would only suffer later. So that was one big thing. But as I then subsequently moved on to the US to do my master's, that's where I also realized that you actually have a second family. It's the friend circle, the group that we all grew up with. And there was a time where this friend of mine was in a very bad situation. It was a big medical emergency. No one else around, no other family to support. I had calls from his family coming in all the time to me to find out how he's doing and stuff. And just, fending for yourself, doing things on your own, made me realize how important it is to really build a network and build a support system that actually helps you throughout your life, personally, professionally, it doesn't matter. So that was, one of the key learnings, I would say. Nothing, significant that way, but significant in terms of the impact it has on life.
Right. And these are life learnings, right? They stay with us all throughout. Well, thank you so much for taking us through that. And moving on to your professional life, sir. Tell us about the journey from your first job till date. How has it been, and what is the evolution that you have seen?
Yeah, so again, finished my engineering, and the first thing I did was I started working with my father, who's manufacturing equipment for Indian Railways. The idea was to basically go down that path, do a lot of stuff around electronics, which is the bachelor's degree that I actually got. I started working with him, and man, it's not easy working with your father. Really, really. I mean, I had to earn my stripes. I would get a lot of challenges, and I came in with a lot of bookish knowledge, and then I had to really learn how do you balance that up with, practical aspects to make things work in the real world. As then from there on, I chose to actually deviate and go to the US to do my master's in computer science, and my field changed. After I finished my master's, of course, while I was a student, I've been everything from an assistant to the dishwasher to an assistant to a librarian to a computer lab manager in the school. Getting into professional career, I started working with AT&T, Telcordia, Bell Labs at the time, through a consulting company. I got my foundational learning in a corporate environment there. I subsequently went on to work with City Capital, and that's where I think I got a lot of my financial services background from to begin with, and then subsequently worked for Siebel Systems, which is a CRM company. It was like, you've thrown at the far end of the pool where you have to work with different clients, understand their requirements, meet their needs, etc. That was a really enriching experience. I then had the opportunity to relocate from the US to India in 2004 with Siebel to help set up a Siebel IBM joint venture in Bangalore, which I did. And, we did that successfully, and I subsequently quit, worked for a very short while in a startup of my own. But then, due to relationship issues with my partners and others, I basically said, okay, this is not, we were doing well, but it was something that I did not want to persevere through at that point. I got an opportunity then to work with Microsoft in Hyderabad, which I took up. Again, in there, a lot of focus around engineering practices. How do you really go and do things at scale where you can't really meet a customer? Because that was really what Microsoft was all about. And subsequently from Microsoft, I went on to Genpact. It was basically in a strategy role where I had to really siphon up the real technology assets from within the company. I met with a lot of business leaders, try to understand what we basically had at the time, and see how we could convert that into something that we could monetize. So a lot of strategy related work. But then after some quick realization that they were really not yet ready to invest in significant technology, I then chose to make a move. It was relatively short stint, but nevertheless, it was very enriching as I look back. I then joined ANZ Bank, Australian New Zealand Bank, and that was the first time where I started basically managing a team outside of India, even in Australia, and it was a good experience. But even when I moved back from the US to India, I really never saw the difference, but I could see how significant it was for everyone else around. But overall, it was a good experience, and knowing that you're taking on global responsibility, global accountability was very good. I then worked with JP Morgan Chase, which is what we just talked about, a little while ago in your introduction. Again, global role. I'm a regional CTO role, but global in the sense that I'm actually managing all the systems, banking systems for retail banking. During India hours were basically under my accountability, and I had to make sure that everything was running, properly. So I think that was it. But then, coming into Servify, again, I always had this this mindset that I wanted to work in a startup. I wanted to be an entrepreneur on my own, but in this case, is a very good and dear friend of mine who actually was asking me to come on, and I just could not refuse. And I think this is one of the best decisions I've made. It's been very enriching. Every single day in a startup, you learn so many new things that is just really it just keeps you on your toes. That's what I would say. So that's been my career so far.
Absolutely, that is very inspiring. Great journey there. We would like to know, how did you handle the highs and lows? I'm sure there may have been quite a few of them in your career. What was your attitude like when you had some really low periods, or even when achievements and successes were at your doorstep?
I'll give you both. Let's start with the low. I'll start with that first. So there was a specific instance where I had a disagreement with my manager, and I subsequently left the company, though I was not very keen to do so. And it really pained me that I felt I was doing what I should have been doing in that role. And the manager who had come in subsequently was relatively new. We hardly had any time to even get to know each other. But I think there was already a preconceived notion of sorts. And I felt like a lot of the work that I had done over the last 1.5, 2 years was pretty much down the water. So that affected me, just emotionally, that drained me, to be very honest. And I think it took me a good year or so thereafter to even recover. I was kind of still finding my own feet and stuff. Now, when I look back, I can look at it and I can say, okay, good learning. I know how I would basically deal in a similar situation again if I had to go through it, or how would I change it so that I don't have to go through that kind of a stress or strain. But that was one of the biggest low moments. There was another, so from a career standpoint, that was one of the low moments. Then I think there was another high that I would say. I was on the cusp of a green card in the US, almost the second time, and I walked away from it.
Wow.
And I was just questioning myself. So if you actually, there's a fantastic article by Peter Senge about your personal vision. So when you really look at it and you think about what would you like to achieve in life, I started basically questioning myself on those lines: a green card here, or maybe a chance to go and set up a joint venture between two large companies. I clearly the second one won, and I relocated to India, and that was such a big high because practically there was nothing ready, and you had to go and build everything up from scratch. And if I wouldn't really think of it in any other way, it would really be an entrepreneur's role. So that was fantastic experience for me, and that's what I would consider one of my biggest highs. Subsequently, there have been other things as well. There are a lot of things within your, professional career in every company that you kind of look back and say, wow, it's like a feather in the cap. You feel really proud of it. And many others, but I think those two just stood out, and I just want to call them out.
Right. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm sure our viewers are enjoying this interview as I am. So we would like to know a little bit about leadership traits that you have picked up over the years and that you have held on to.
Yeah, so I think my transition to leadership was also over time. So while I may have picked up things even in in a role that I'm actually just operating within a smaller scope on, I think some of the foundational aspects started getting built up right there. I realized that, if you look back, India has basically been operating in a very hierarchical structure for a while. I think all of that's gone out the door now. A lot of things are really based on relationships, based around, if you really want to motivate people who work for you, with you, you've got to be, if you want them to put in their best, you've got to motivate them. It's got to be something that they want to do, not something that you're asking them to do, right? So I think that started building up a lot of focus in my mind around being empathetic, being able to let people learn by failing themselves, not necessarily going and solving things for them, because then you're undercutting their own learning possibilities, right? So empathy was, one big thing. I think that really helped me understand and connect with people a lot better. I also realized over time was that, when you look at people staying in an organization, leaving an organization, a lot of that is really centered around Maslow's hierarchy, your basic needs, your ability to find purpose, your ability to learn and grow, your ability to operate in a manner that you are able to go and drive things. So for me, it became extremely important to be able to help people understand and get very clear purpose, and make sure that we're not just beating around the bush, but really driving whatever we want to into some sort of an actionable outcome. So I think those were really foundational elements. And over time, I think as I started growing in the leadership role, it became extremely important for me to also understand how I could become more effective, which required me to be able to scale my impact across a larger portfolio, a larger organization. And that's really where I think I started learning a lot more about really effective delegation and getting things done. And then, finally, you are really only as good as the team around you. So attracting great talent was another key thing. So to me, if I really look back, being empathetic with people, being able to create an environment where they can actually feel like they're inspired and they can learn, they can grow and contribute bring in their best to the field. And then on top of that, really being able to make myself much more effective operationally, right? So I think those are the aspects that I would basically call out from a leadership perspective.
Right. Well, thank you so much. And we had a question, what is it about your behavior that attracts people to you? But I'm not going to ask you that, because I think we can pretty much sense that the fact that you believe so much in empathy is probably at least one of the factors that attracts people towards you and makes you the great leader that you are. You spoke about all these things, sir. It surely must be very challenging to lead your team. Can you tell us, so where did you pick up your team skills? I know you have spoken a little bit about handling a team, but any challenges that you face, and how do you overcome those challenges?
Yeah, so I think there have been many situations where you are challenged with getting a certain outcome, and in some cases you may politely ask for the teams to go and do it, or you may in some cases get very aggressive or assertive, right? There are situations where you want to give people extra time to get something done, though I mean it's pretty clear to you if you really think about it that things are not going to change. Or you look at making sure that you're taking a decision in the right manner. I think all of these have come over time, and it's really, there's no substitute to experience. I think you can read all the books you want, you can do all of that, but when you actually go through challenges, when you go through situations, it's only then that you actually learn and kind of form a certain idea for how to go about doing things. It's yeah, I mean, when I think back, one of the most low moments, I wouldn't say from a career standpoint, but for me in my life, was where one of my team members actually committed suicide. And I was at a complete loss. This was something that I was just not able to get out of. I didn't know if there was something that we were doing at work that may have caused that. I don't know if there was something personally or whatever else. And I mean, when you look at things like that, it just really affects you in a manner that, I mean, you just look at every single day and say, okay, you know what? Let's make this a good day. Let's make this something that people walk away from, remember, and say, okay, yes, we've done what we needed to do today, right? I think it's really just more that just the team skills really come more from interaction with people. At the end of it, they are the ones who make a big difference in our field, and in every field, in fact, today, if you look at it. And I think it matters a lot in terms of really how you're dealing with them. And I think that's why I mentioned even the transition from early days from being an individual contributor to being a manager, and figuring out how do you get from being micromanaging about something and getting something done to letting people be and doing things on their own and letting them learn on their own. I think that just came with time through the different roles.
Right. So again, many more learnings there for all our viewers. So let's talk about you now, about your skills and your work-life balance. First, let's come to the skills. Technology is ever changing, and so is media, and so are a lot of things around us. How have you invested in yourself to keep improving and updating your skills?
So it's an absolute constant, this change, and especially more so in technology than in anything else, right? And technology now is not something that you would consider a numerator skill, it's a denominator skill, in the sense that it is something that every one of our careers, yours, mine, everyone's is affected by. You become familiar with tools, you use them. There's a lot of focus on efficiency, effectiveness, and stuff. And where there could be some things that are, there are clearly some skills that are very technology oriented, but at some point you start looking at really the impact that the technology will give, not just the technology itself, right? That transition has happened for me, in the sense that you wouldn't see me caught up on saying, okay, do I know this technology skill or that technology skill? I think there's a lot of general skill and general knowledge that has come up by working on specific technologies. But then there's also enough to know that I wouldn't be fooled by someone coming in and putting something else in front of me and saying, okay, hey, this is a great thing. No, I think there's inherently a lot of that knowledge that gets built up in all of our respective functions, right? You can look at things, you can dissect them fairly fast. For me, it was extremely essential to make sure that there is a continuous focus on learning. And that meant reading regularly. That meant looking at training sessions where I could, both technical or non-technical, learning on the job, building a network, a mentor network that you can always go back and bounce ideas with in a safe zone, understanding what's okay, what's not okay, understanding what will work, what will not, experimenting. And all of these together have really helped me. Again, there's probably not enough hours in the day. When I first discovered TED Talks, that was such an eye opener. It was such an inspiration, and you just want to sit down there and just keep watching them all day long. But you can't do that. So you have to also start looking at where you want to invest the biggest currency you have, which is your time, and understanding that you can be disciplined about it and use it to gain the specific knowledge or skills that you want is probably the best and the biggest investment you can make. So that's what I've done. There are times that I've gone and broken away and done, even for example, the AI/ML course that I did was over 18 weekends. I mean, you're spending that kind of time away while doing a full-time job in kind of a role which requires you to sometimes even work on weekends, right? So yeah, that was a strain. But when you look back and say, okay, I've done that, I finished that, it's good. And you learn that you can actually now do so many things with the likes of Coursera, EDX. I mean, there's so many MOOCs that are available now that, I mean, if you really identify and know very clearly what you want to do, you can very easily achieve it. But it requires discipline and focus, which I've been okay about. I wouldn't say best, but definitely been okay about.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And now let's talk about how you maintain work-life balance, a little bit about your hobbies or interests, and what do you do when you're not in CXO mode?
Okay. um, yeah, so I mean, work-life balance to me is really, literally you got to decide what you're willing to compromise and what you're not. Things are very fluid. I don't think that I can differentiate work or life explicitly. Yes, there are certain events for both that are non-compromisable that you want to make time for. And being able to constantly make sure that you are doing that. I mean, the more structured, the more planned you can make it, the better it is. But sometimes one takes precedence over the other, depending on the context and situation, and you've got to be able to manage that. Now, I may end up working on something over a weekend, and I may end up just taking a day off during a weekday just to be able to say, okay, I need to go and do something like this. When it's for yourself, you can manage that fairly well. When it starts to affect family or people around you, be it at the workspace or at home, I think that's really where it starts to get challenging, and you just need to find the right balance for it, right? Because complexity may demand. I mean, it's going to be really ridiculous for me if my team's actually working on something of significance and I'm not there, right? And that means I'm not invested in it with them, or I'm not giving it the same level of urgency that they need to, right? Or they are giving. But if I'm with them, that just bolsters up so much more of that connect and focus. Same thing, if you've got, let's say, a performance that your child has to give or something, and if I'm not there for it, then again, it's my failing, right? So being able to manage that is It's not easy, but being able to manage that is something that every one of us needs to learn to do. I don't think that you can actually go and put up black and white, oh, this is work and this is life, and just really have that distinction. You have to constantly just manage it. It's life. I mean, that's the way I look at it overall. And no one else is drawing those boundaries but you. So, I mean, I'm very clear on certain days of the week. I will not take calls in the evening unless, again, if it's a customer call and stuff like that, or there's a pressing need, it's different. But otherwise, I wouldn't take it, and that's okay. I mean, that's a boundary you've got to draw. No one else is going to do it for you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And indeed, it's been great so far. And we do have a fun segment also for you. So we'll quickly move on to that. This is the rapid fire round where you have to choose between the options or give us a quick short answer. So are you ready, sir?
Okay, all right. Let's
Okay,
go.
so which one are you? Optimistic, cynical, or realistic?
Optimistic.
Okay. If you were granted one wish, what would you ask for?
Oh, to go back in time and become a child again.
Sorry, I didn't get that. Go
Possibilities
back in
related.
time?
I said go back in time and become a child again.
Wow, absolutely. An idea that changed your life.
Education for children. Very good friend of mine, a mentee actually, showed me how she's able to make a difference in lives of children. And I think when that came in front of me, I knew that I was invested in life to do whatever I can for education for children.
So are you associated with any organizations? I think I read about
Yeah,
something. Yes.
yeah, a couple of them, just orphanages and other places, but Rural Development Foundation, etc. So just a couple.
Okay, great. Wow, that's very commendable indeed. A leader that you admire the most.
Andy Grove.
Okay. Do you want to tell us why?
I mean, he was a refugee, went to the US, set up the company that we know now as Intel, and the kind of transformation and impact that one company has made in everything that we do is phenomenal. And he took the time to actually take down his management lessons and put them down in a book and share them. And I mean, he would do something and he would bring that right back to share with others. Never holding back, but rather wanting to share so that the place around you can actually get better. So I mean, that's I just find that very inspirational.
Wow, amazing. Any song or quote or poem that resonates with your life or that you hold on to dearly?
I won't say resonates with my life, but something that stuck with me is an Irish airman foresees his death. It's a William Butler Yeats poem. I remember the words till now, but it's when I look at what's happening now with Russia, Ukraine, all of that. I mean, it resonates, not necessarily with my life, but just in general. Yeah, it stayed with me. Yeah.
Absolutely. Favorite city in the world?
New York City, love the city.
Okay. Favorite food item?
No, that's biryani.
Amazing.
So I try to stay away from it as much as I can, but just
Yeah,
can't help it.
absolutely. Planning your life or going with the flow?
Going with the flow.
Okay. And fill in the blank. Life is incomplete without.
Friends.
Great there. All right. Well, thank you so much. And to be honest, sir, I would love to continue this interview, but due to paucity of time, I have to end here. So thank you so much once again. This was really great indeed. That was Mr. Aditya Mony, co-owner and group CTO Servify, sharing his life story with us. And indeed, what a great story that is. I'm sure our viewers had a lot of takeaways from hearing you speak, sir. And now I'm delighted to welcome Mr. Vikram Mulye, Director, Product Marketing, SMB, India and South Asia at Lenovo India, to join this conversation. Hello, Mr. Mulye. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Good afternoon, Dipti. Thanks for having me here.
Good afternoon, sir. So we have one question that I'm going to be throwing at the both of you. Let me first ask Mr. Mony. Sir, according to you, what are the top IT challenges that you foresee going forward?
IT challenges we are undergoing right now, as well as foresee going forward. I'll cover both. Clearly, I think one thing that's on top of all of our minds is talent shortage, or I won't say maybe not shortage, but yeah, talent shortage, I guess, from each company's perspective, because the great resignation and the great challenge we generally see, but that's one of the biggest ones. As I look ahead, one of the things that I do see is, given what we've all experienced and how companies have changed their operating models and stuff, we will transition to a gig economy where people will contribute in in units of work. And how we can effectively manage that with all of the required compliance in each of our fields and stuff is when I even start thinking about it, my head rolls. But I think that is something that we will all have to start to look at. Then, of course, the next thing is really around supporting our distributed teams. Today, we are a company that's growing globally, and we've got people in so many different countries. Being able to make sure that we keep them connected into a single fabric, and in alignment with our culture. Technology alone will not solve it. You've also got to bring in aspects around culture and technology all coming together. So I think doing that in a manner where they still feel like they get, all the employees feel like they still get the best that they can, that they want. Just even solving for that, that that's a problem, that you want to do your best, but then sometimes just the limitations of what can we do, what tools exist, what technologies exist, what processes can be implemented, how are others doing it. I think all of those things become very relevant. And for me, really, in this ever increasing complexity, in this world with ever increasing complexity, with data and data related regulations just growing up so much with respect to what's personalized data, what's non-personalized data, how are both to be treated. I think that itself, again, is another head roll. I think that's another challenge that we all need to solve for. Those are the things that come to my mind.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, sir, for sharing that. I shall put forward the same question to you, Mr. Moulier. According to you, sir, what are the top IT challenges that you foresee going forward?
I think Mr. Mony covered quite a lot of them, so I would be echoing some of them. I think the interesting one which he put was about talent. I think that's a very valid one, especially with the way COVID has turned the world topsy-turvy for all of us. So that's something which impacts IT, but not directly IT. But if I were to look at it more from my organization's perspective, while COVID is sort of now virtually gone, I would say I hope that turns out to be true. But I think the way the last 2 years have gone, I think adapting to this new normal has been one of the bigger challenges for us, as well as if I see for our customers. And as Mr. Aditya also said, while even COVID goes away, we don't expect a full return to the pre-COVID scenario for all organizations. I think the hybrid work culture is here to stay. So from that perspective, having IT infrastructure which can be quickly deployed, because we have seen quick ramp-ups being needed. So how do you really cope up with that? That's been one of the challenges for our customers, and for us, how do we partner with them? The second is what kind of device mix? I mean, we all know when COVID set in initial, there was a huge spike in laptop purchases because everyone was working from home. But what is the right kind of balance? And the other interesting point, which Mr. Aditya said also, is about data security, because laptops versus desktops has a different security equation there. So how do you organizations really balance? And a lot of organizations today are covered by various acts, not just in India, but outside, about data security. So that balance. And the third is, again, more to do with work on, which is the connectivity. How do you really deploy solutions which implement? I mean, all of us today are on a Zoom call, which wasn't the norm 2 years ago, but that's become known. And virtually all our calls happen there, people working in very remote locations. So how do we deploy around that? I think that's been the case. I would have added supply related challenges maybe if this discussion was about 6 months ago, but I think at least for the PC industry, we seem to be tiding over it by now.
Well, thank you so much, sir. And thank you, Mr. Mony, once again for your valuable time and for joining us on this exclusive virtual interview. Dear viewers, keep watching this space for more engaging, inspiring, and motivating stories. This is the Economic Times Cutting Chai Story.